Hey radio enthusiasts, Paul here, and it gives me great pleasure today to do this radio review on this budget shortwave AM FM radio from TIVDIO model V111. There's been other videos done about this on YouTube, but I thought I would do mine as well. And this is made by the Henan Eshao Electronic Commerce Company in China. I actually Googled them. It was interesting. One picture has them all dressed up in military fatigues, and I don't know if they contract with the Chinese military, but they make two-way walkie-talkie type products, as well as several versions of this radio, one of which actually records to micro SD card, which is kind of cool. This version does not, but that's fine for me. I picked this up for 14 bucks on eBay. So on the medium wave, you've got two different bands, 522 kilohertz to 1620. That's the traditional band. And 153 to 279. I've read that you can pick up some navigational signals on that one. I have not. And on the FM also, which is kind of interesting, you've got several different bands. For me in the US, 87 to 108 megahertz. And then you've got a 64 to 108 for Russia and 76 to 90 for Japan. Now on the shortwave, it goes from 3.2 megahertz to 21.9 megahertz, divided into 7 meters. So that's the specs on that, guys. As far as shortwave, medium wave, and FM. I'm listening to some FM right here, and a medium wave signal. This is daytime. But anyway, the antenna is 17 inches. You can see I've got that here. Pretty long. That's good for FM, in my understanding, and maybe shortwave. Maybe you guys could clarify. I always thought shortwave is transmitted as amplitude modulation, but apparently it's picked up through the FM antenna. Am I wrong, guys? Or am I just missing something there? I'm a newbie to the hobby. So if you guys could clarify that, you guys who are into that, I'd be really curious to know. Another cool thing about this radio, and last night I was picking up some really good stuff. It's got this flap in back, this plastic flap that you can hinge up. And I actually had this set up last night like this because the AM bar antenna is right back in here. And when it's facing this way, I notice it gets more surface area facing out the window. And I'm wondering if that's why the manufacturer made this kind of back hinge flap here to kind of put it like this, because I was picking up Chicago last night. I'm in southern Maine, and I was picking up 900 miles stations away, guys. Check out this map. I keep this map on my Google Maps. I highly recommend that if you're into radio stuff. It's really easy to create layers in maps, and I have an AM layer and a shortwave layer. And last night, for example, it was clear skies. I was picking up AM 1000 WMVP. It's an ESPN sports station. I was picking up 1160 WYLL, a Christian station. I'm going to cut the radio while I'm talking here. And I was picking up 780 WBBM, which is like an R&B and soul station in Chicago. I had never picked those up before. And I'm wondering if that's because I did have the radio tilted down, as mentioned, using that hinge, that plastic hinge, or if it was just a really clear night. I've also picked up 1100 WTAM out of Cleveland, very powerful station. And that's about 600 miles away from me. A whole bunch of stations out in New York City, 1010 Winds, 1130 Bloomberg Radio, several in Rochester, New York, Binghamton, New York as well. And on the shortwave side of things, last night I was checking out 4840 WWCR, a Christian station out of Nashville. And on several occasions, the longest range I picked up with this little guy are stations out of Cuba. And last night I was listening to an English language broadcast from 6000 Radio Habana. And the transmitter for that is just southwest of Havana, Cuba. Very interesting that, and that's very common amongst what I've been researching amongst people on the East Coast, to be picking up Cuba stations. That's nothing unusual, but it is fun. Now, having said that, these long-range transmissions, and that's kind of what I'm out for, like how long can I get with this little thing? They come and go in waves. I guess as they're bouncing off the ionosphere, I will get a station in very clearly, like even in Chicago, like last night listening to WMVP, for example, or BBM, for about a minute, maybe a minute and a half, and then it will dissolve into just static after a minute or so, and then just be totally static for a minute or two, and then it'll slowly come back in, and then when it comes in powerful, I mean it's just like blasting for that minute and a half. Right now I have it powered with the micro USB, which is very handy. Anything micro USB is very handy. And be sure you subscribe to my channel if you haven't, because I'm going to be getting into solar power applications coming up here, because there's so much we can do with USB power. And a really cool feature of this radio is that it does charge my nickel metal hydride batteries, my AA batteries. I read a review elsewhere that it was not charging someone's batteries, but these batteries were definitely worn down. They're rated at 1.2 volts, and this radio and the micro USB charge these up to 1.35 volts or something like that, to the point that they were warm, and I actually take them out just as a precaution. But it's definitely, the charger on this here is definitely working. So, with all these different features, plus you've got a clock, you've got an alarm, you can store memory stations here of your favorite stations. With all the features and the small form factor, it recharges batteries. I don't know if you can really do better getting into shortwave, and I'm very impressed with the range that it picks up at night on the AM band. I mean, this is just something I've been getting into. I've always been into AM radio in general, but I mean, I'm pretty impressed with this little guy. And if you guys know of another kind of radio, for under $15 or even $20 that you could get into and have so much versatility and learn so much about the hobby of analog radio, which is still alive and well, let me know in the comments section. Or, even if you just kind of dig this video and have enjoyed this review, please leave your comments, because I know this is a niche audience, this analog radio stuff. Sure, the argument can be made, well, you can get everything on the internet digitally, and I do. I have a TuneIn radio app on my Android phone. I regularly listen to CNN and some other stations on the TuneIn app. I mean, it's great, podcasts, etc. But there is something very romantic and magical through picking up analog signals that are just, bouncing between the Earth and the plasma-charged ionosphere. especially at night when the electrons are in that kind of magic moment with the wavelengths such that there's enough repulsion between the electrons in the ionosphere and the electromagnetic waves going upward that they get bounced back down to Earth, whereas in the daytime, the signals just get absorbed into the ionosphere. It's also a nice thing to do before you go to sleep. If you're just lying in bed, some people like to, a lot of times I'll watch a video or videos before I go to sleep, or do some reading. But with having this thing, a couple times a week, instead of reading or watching a movie or videos, I'll just play around with the radio before I go to sleep and see what I can get. I've read reports of people on the East Coast getting shortwave transmissions from Europe and even as far as Turkey. So that would be really cool. But as for now, I've had this thing for about, I don't know, maybe 3 weeks now. And that's where I'm at. Thanks for watching, you guys, and I look forward to reading your comments below. Have a great day.